One very important omission is the nativity. Every time in church, they would always teach that the Magi showed up right after the shepherds, when factually, it was a year later. And Jesus was not a baby. He was a toddler. And they weren't even in Jerusalem, most likely. They were somewhere else. The nativity shows a barn, and we know that's not factually correct. It was a cave, according to historical records and the kind of things they would build back then. And a lot of the stories left out vital information. And when I mean vital, growing up as a kid, I thought the Bible had a lot of interesting stories that was like a library, when in fact, most of these stories depict horrific genocide, murder, sexual assault, dismemberment, bestiality, homosexuality, child sacrifice, executions, cannibalism. I mean, if I miss any, throw them in the comments, because I'd love to know anything else. But those are pretty much the main things. When you omit certain details, what you're doing is setting up a child to have a completely incorrect view of characters, God. I mean, the character of God. If you asked a child, what is God's character? They would say, God is a loving God. Because they've never heard the complete, accurate, nothing, like, they haven't heard the real version of these stories. They think God is a loving God, when most of the stories include a part where God kills people, babies especially. When you don't teach kids stories accurately, historically, and correctly, kids will get in a skewed, incorrect version of the characters they're reading. And you might say, well, kids can't or shouldn't read stories with cannibalism or child sacrifice. That's fine. Don't teach them that story until they're at least 13 then. But they won't. Not one time in any of the 7 churches in Christian fundamentalism, Southern Baptist, Calvinism, Presbyterian, did anyone ever include the parts that were bad. The closest we ever got was mentioning that Pharaoh killed all the children, the Jewish children in Egypt. I think that was in Exodus. Or Herod killing all the newborn children in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Those are the only genocides ever mentioned, or infanticides mentioned in any service. Anytime a genocide was mentioned, it was usually as a judgment or to protect somebody like Jesus. It was never condemned. Now, the Herod part definitely was condemned. But the genocide that is mentioned in the first, I would say, after the Jews left Egypt, all the way until halfway through the Old Testament, never one time is any verses mentioned about any genocide, murder, or sexual assault is it condemned in a service. It's usually written off as the Jews needed the land. The problem with not teaching people, especially adults, especially kids, they get a false view of God. They see God as a loving God, when in actual reality, if you don't believe in him and do exactly what he says, and, give him what he wants, when he wants, and basically abandon your family, he kills you or your children. If you're a human being, which God made you to be, if you believe in Christianity, if you fail, your own children could be killed. If God wants to test you, your kids die. I think that's in the book of Job. And the problem with this is that children grow up so indoctrinated with false narratives of characters, Bible heroes, God and Jesus. Once they even start reading the Bible, and which would be a surprise because I would bet my life that the seven church